Hello and welcome back to my channel. It's been a while. Today I will be talking about the books I judged for the Booktube prize. So the Booktube prize, if you don't know, is a book prize judged by readers. It can be people who have a Booktube channel, it can also be viewers, and it's set up in a kind of a tournament style competition. So there's a starting field of 48 books, which are divided into 8 groups of 6, and then each group of books is judged by a group of judges. So you get assigned a group of 6 books, you read them and you rank them in order from least to most favorite, and then those scores are evened out, and the 3 most popular books of each group will then move on to the next round. So then you have a field of 24 books, and then 12, and then 6, and then eventually there's like a bronze, silver and gold medalist. I hope that makes sense, but I'm also kind of assuming that a lot of you will have heard of the prize before. In short, for this video it means I've read 6 books and I'll talk about them in the order that I ranked them, so from my least favorite to my favorite of those 6. I have judged a couple of rounds of the Booktube prize before with very mixed results, to be honest. I've read some books that I've really loved that I wouldn't have read otherwise. I've read some books I wish I hadn't read. So I was a little hesitant because it is a big commitment, and also I don't know, I don't always agree with the rules, but yeah, let's not get into that now. I do really love an assigned reading project. I love trying books that maybe I wouldn't have picked myself, hoping there's a surprise in there. So I did end up signing up. I judged the fiction group F this time around, and I'll put a graphic on the screen so you can see which books they were. And I can already tell you that I found it really hard to rank these books. I didn't really find any new favorites, and most of these books were just very middle of the road, with things I liked about them and things I didn't like about them. And the way I ranked them honestly could have been different if I had put like a different weight to different aspects. So yeah, there isn't really any science behind this. It was very much more like an instinct kind of thing. Alright, so without further ado, let's see my rankings for the Octofinals of the Booktube prize, judging fiction group F. In 6th place, I've put Theft by Abdulrazak Gurner. The last time I judged for the Booktube prize, I also read a book by this author, and I ranked that 5th or 6th. I didn't remember why I didn't like it, just that I didn't enjoy it. But I went into this book with an open mind because the premise sounded something like I might enjoy. It's a coming-of-age novel where we follow 3 young people from different backgrounds living in Zanzibar. And I usually like a coming-of-age story. I love that it's not set in the Western world. Yeah, I felt like the premise had some potential. However, after reading it, I now remember why I didn't like the book that I read by the author the first time around, because it is just such a nothing book. You know, writing style, nothing. Atmosphere, nothing. Characters, flat. Themes, I have no idea what this book was trying to accomplish. I don't feel like there was any point to this story. Plot was mostly boring. There was some twist in this book that in any other story would cause some upheaval, you know, some excitement. And in this book, the story just went like this. And then something would happen that you would expect it to go a little bit more like this, but it just went like this, you know. I'm going like this, and then, oh well, I'm going like this now, just flat. Yeah, it was just really boring. I love a book where nothing happens, but then you need something else. I mean, you need character development or beautiful writing, you know, something to make up for that. But this to me was just nothing. It made no impact, and I have nothing more to say about it. What I found interesting about this, you know, ranking was that there are books that I put higher on the list where I could more easily pinpoint what I didn't like about it, but I would just rather read a book that makes me angry or annoys me rather than a book that makes me feel indifferent. You know, I'd rather feel negative emotions than nothing, because at least then it triggered some response in me. At number 5, I put The Sisters by Yunus Hassan Khemiri. So this book, unsurprisingly, is about 3 sisters, the Mikola sisters, and the first chapter starts at a New Year's party on the turn of the millennium, where you quickly learn that even though they are sisters, they are not very similar to each other, both in terms of looks and personality. You follow these sisters throughout their lives for the next couple of decades, but each chapter will spend a shorter time. So the first chapter spends a whole year, then the next is over 6 months, then a month, and then a week, a day, and then the last one is just 1 minute. We also meet another character, a young man who, when he was young, lived in the same neighborhood as these sisters, and ever since he has kind of felt a kinship and a fascination towards these sisters, partly because they both have immigrant parents from, if I remember correctly, Tunisia or Morocco. So yeah, the book kind of alternates between the sister's own story and from this other narrator, kind of looking at their lives from an outsider perspective. Obviously this book spans quite a long period of time, so you can assume they have things going on in their lives, and I feel like it kind of goes too far to go really into that in this video. But you know, there are things like issues they deal with being the kids of immigrant parents, career choices, romantic relationships, friendship, etc. What did I think about this book? First of all, I thought the writing style was very easy to get into. This book is, I think, nearly 700 pages, but it didn't feel like it. It flows very well, the dialogue felt really natural, and yeah, it was just easygoing, and I never felt like I was plodding through it. I felt that the writing was witty and funny. I'd say at times it is almost deceptively straightforward, because I do feel like this is a book with layers, a book that will reveal a bit more once you start thinking about it or like discuss it with other people. One of the things that I picked up on this book is the question of who decides your story, who decides which part of your life, of your character, of your ideas are worth telling. Is it, you know, is it yourself? Do you decide? Do other people decide? Is it up to fate? I think the author really explores that in an interesting way, with the different perspectives of the sisters and the other man looking at their lives, and I think it tells that people are, you know, they're living their own life and being their own persons, but they are also like the side character in other people's lives. Also, how much can you really know a person as an outsider, but also as someone who seems more close, like a sister or a parent. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure where I'm going with this, but I noticed that there was something interesting going on there, and I enjoyed that. So yeah, why did I not rank this higher? I think mainly just because it did not make a lasting impression on me. I did not really care about any of the main characters. I mean, I don't mind unlikable characters, but I do mind when I don't really care about them either way. It's like I said with the first book, like I'd rather feel a negative emotion towards a character rather than you know, indifference or you know, I don't care about a character. So yeah, it was mostly a book where I enjoyed it whilst reading it, but when I finished, it was just I was feeling indifferent about it, and that's not something I like. So yeah, my next book at number 4 is definitely not a book I feel indifferent about. I probably have the most to say about this book, which is Fox by Joyce Carol Oates. So this book, in its essence, is a mystery crime book, in that we start with a dead body found in a car in a ravine, and the book at its bare bones is about trying to figure out how this body got there. When this body is found, it's obviously been there a while, it's been submerged in the water, animals have gotten to it, and it's quite unrecognizable. The car, however, belongs to a man named Francis Fox, and he is in fact gone missing. They'll have to do like dental testing to see if the dead person is actually Francis Fox, and like in the meantime the police does a little investigating. But the book goes back in time first, where we meet Francis Fox, or Mr. Fox as he is referred to throughout the novel. He is the new English teacher at a very prestigious private school. We soon learn that this man is a pedophile, and he has left his previous job, his previous teaching job, because he was caught in, let's say, less appropriate behaviors with young girls. In some way, however, he managed to convince his old employer to let him go free of charge. You know, he wins a defamation case against his school. He legally changes his name. So the new school has no idea about his past. Obviously, because you wouldn't get hired as a teacher if you were a pedophile, I would hope. And in the beginning of the novel, he does talk about realizing he should probably not do this anymore. In like, he didn't feel like he was really doing something wrong, but more in a like, this is forbidden by law and I could get me into trouble, and I don't think I can get away with it in another time. However, on his first day of school, he takes one look at one of the girls in class and all his intentions are out of the window. So yeah, that's sort of the setup of this book. There's more elements to it and more characters at play, but I think that's enough information on what the book is about. So yeah, my thoughts. Let's get the obvious out of the way. This book is about a pedophile and it has some graphic descriptions, and just because of that I would never recommend this book to anyone, because this book made me feel sick to my stomach. But having said that, I also think that that's where the strength of this book lies. It dares to go to a very dark place and it will make you uncomfortable, and I think the author does that in a way that feels genuine to the character and not something that is done purely for shock value. I think the strength of the writing is such that she wrote a really vile character, but you still can't look away. I think Mr. Fox is an interesting character because he doesn't seem to feel any remorse for what he's doing. He knows on an intellectual level that what he's doing is morally wrong, but he also genuinely feels that what he's doing out of love. He's also very aware of his effect on people. Everyone is really charmed by him, and he uses that on his victims, but also on other people, mostly women, in his life, to make them adore him, but most importantly, to create an image of himself of a charming, attentive, smart man, and it's really hard and also really interesting to read that, you know, to see everyone fall for this when you as the reader are the only one who knows that it is pure manipulation. I feel like the best part of the novel was also the hardest part of the novel. Another part of the book was this police investigation, and to me that really stood in stark contrast with the rest of the novel. I thought it was boring, I thought it was way too long. Now I have to admit I don't usually enjoy police procedurals or like courtroom scenes or anything like that, you know, just to be fair. But in this section we mainly follow the head police officer in this like local police district, who does most of the investigation by himself with the occasional help with one other police officer. Now for one, it's kind of implied that we are supposed to be rooting for him because he supposedly is the only one who could see through Mr. Fox. I think the thing is, he actually found a website with evidence, let's say, on Mr. Fox's computer by accident, and if he had not seen that, this whole book would not exist, and he too, I believe, would have fallen for Mr. Fox's lies. And without going into the details why, he just gave me the ick throughout the book. You know, there's no way I would be rooting for him. And then for two, there are some things done professionally that I would sincerely hope are not done in real life, even with the little faith I have in the American police/legal system. So he goes in to interview these girls who are the victims of Mr. Fox. They have been groomed by him, they've been drugged, they've been forced to commit sexual acts, which were then filmed and put online. He talks to these girls without the parents' consent, without even informing them what he will talk about, or then even knowing what has happened to their daughters. I would think that to interview children who are the victims of abuse, you would need specially trained professionals. This officer was not. He also didn't even consult a professional or any colleague at all to discuss how to go about it. And you know, he just went in, talked to them, asked all sorts of leading questions to like trick these girls into talking like they were to blame rather than they were the victims. So at one point he calls in a man for questioning. He's not under arrest or anything, I don't think that would matter, but he then proceeds to show him these really disturbing pictures of a dead, decaying body. And I was like, you can't just show traumatizing images to someone who just happened to be in the same area, like even if you do suspect him of murder. I don't know, it just really peeved me that it just made the whole police investigation part so unbelievable. And I know, like, real police work is mostly super boring and a lot of paperwork and no one wants to read about it. But yeah, I felt like if the author did a little bit more research into it and just made it a little bit more realistic, I would have enjoyed that more and not spent like 300 pages rolling my eyes. So yeah, TLDR, I think, is a part really well executed literary character study on a really vile character with all the content warnings, and it's part boring and unbelievable police investigation. I'd say too long on the whole. I want people to read this book because I want to discuss it with them, but also would never ask anyone to read this book ever. Right, we're getting in my top 3, so the 3 books I've put forward to go on to the next round. At number 3 I've put The Lilac People by Milo Todd. So this book on paper I was probably most keen to read going in. Like if you gave me the blurb and I had no preconceived notions about any of the authors of the group, which makes it all the harder to say that this really did not live up to my expectations. This is a historical fiction novel told in a dual timeline, one set in Berlin in 1933 at the start of Hitler's rise to power, and the other on a farm in southern Germany a few weeks after the liberation in 1945. We start in the latter timeline where we meet Birdie, who's a trans man, and his girlfriend Sophie. They have been pretending to be a married couple, living on a farm, trying to avoid getting captured and sent to a concentration camps, because trans and queer people were one of the minority groups that were also persecuted in Nazi Germany, besides Jewish people. But then when the war ends, they soon realize that the danger is still isn't over, because they learn that being trans is still illegal, and the American forces are putting trans people into forced labor. And one day another younger trans man comes to their house asking them to hide him. He has survived one of the concentration camps and has now escaped, and the three of them are trying to come up with a plan to flee Germany and go to America. And then in the 1933 timeline we learn how Birdie and Sophie met. We start at a time where life for queer people was relatively free. You read about the Berlin queer club scene at the time, where queer people would get together and they could party and they could be themselves without judgment. Bertie also spent some time working at the Institute of Sexual Sciences, which was a real place where research was done on gender and sexuality, and where you could get hormone therapy and gender confirming surgery. So even though it wasn't like widely accepted to be queer, they could still live a relatively open and free life. But with the rise of the Nazi regime, things got like more and more restricted, and in the end really dangerous. So in this book I learned a lot about being queer in the 1930s and 40s Germany that I didn't know, which was both what I enjoyed about it and also to its detriment. I love it when a book teaches me about something I previously didn't know a lot about. I'd say the treatment of queer people in Nazi Germany just isn't something you learn a lot about in history classes in school. So for that alone I would recommend this book. However, I feel like all the other elements of this book suffered from it. I felt like Milo Todd really just wanted to teach us something and to tell us a story that have been left out of the history books. You can tell he's done a lot of research on this topic and he just wanted to put it all in a book. A lot of the events in this book are based on real events, a lot of the people are based on real people, and because he spends so much time in this book trying to teach us something, there's no more time left for character development or just storytelling. There's a lot of telling instead of showing in this book, a lot of explaining instead of letting the reader experiencing the story on its own. I feel like the plot was too convenient or too sensational. There's a lot of like narrow escapes and people being somewhere exactly at the wrong or the right time. I feel like the whole thing was just the opposite of subtle or nuanced, which I find really frustrating because I think Milo Todd is right in that more people should learn about what he has to tell. But as a story, as a novel, it's just a bit crap. So yeah, but I still put it relatively high on my list, even though if I would judge it purely by literary quality, this would be my least favorite. Just because, I don't know, I'd rather more people read a badly written book about an important topic, which they could then use as a jumping off point to read more about it and, you know, get this history lesson out in the world, rather than a more well written book about a pedophile. It's a choice I made. On my runner-up spot, I've put Gliff by Annie Smith. I've only read one book by her years ago, and that one didn't make much of an impression, but I really enjoyed this one. This book has kind of a dystopian setting. It starts when a family of four, 2 children and their parents, drop off their mum at work. They then drive home, but as soon as they get there, their father sees a line of red paint around their house and is like, nope, we gotta get out of here. So they get into their camper van, they drive away, but then when they stop for the night, the next morning there's also a line of red paint around their van. Obviously this is not a good sign, and the father decides that he will leave the girls in an empty house with 42 cans of tin food, some cash, and he goes off to try and figure out what's going on. So that's kind of the starting point of the novel. The 2 siblings quickly start to explore their neighborhood, and they figure out that they are what is called unverifiables, who are people who live outside of the surveillance and control of the government and are therefore also considered a threat by authorities. So yeah, the setting is kind of dystopian with, you know, eerie similarities to our current society, but I wouldn't say that that's where the focus of the book lies. There's not a lot of time spent world building, very little is explained. I'm not entirely sure I really understood what was going on. I'd even go so far to say that I'm not entirely sure Annie Smith understood what was going on. But yeah, I guess it worked more as kind of a metaphor for bureaucracy and xenophobia and surveillance, rather than, you know, an actual possible scenario that was really thought out. What I did love in this book, and also what I think what Annie Smith is known for, is her use of words and language and playing with language. Language is kind of a form of resistance in this novel, and you can really see that that's where Annie Smith has put her energy in. You can tell that she's a writer who reads a lot. You know, she just loves words and the origin of words, and you know how language develops, and stories and legends, and how language ties history to the present, to the future. And I feel like the book felt really playful in that way. I think in terms of plot, it felt a little bit too disjointed to me. I'm not sure what was going on. I'm not sure why our characters made the choices they made. But overall, I think it felt really inventive, and I would definitely want to read more of her work. Her most recent novel is actually a companion novel called to this, also called Gliff, but spelled Gliph. I'm not sure in what way they connect to each other. I don't think it's like a prequel or a sequel, but like in a traditional sense, but I'm very curious about that novel now. So yeah, and that means in my number 1 spot, I've put The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. This book starts when a young Vietnamese American man named Hai walks up a bridge over a river with the intention to end his life. An elderly woman who lives by the river sees him, and she manages to talk him out of this suicide attempt. Her name is Grazina, and she's originally from one of the Baltic states, and she suffers from dementia. And she tells him that she has trouble finding someone to care for her, and she offers him a place to stay if he keeps her company and makes sure he takes her medication and just, you know, generally just helps her out. And they basically form this unlikely friendship. These are two people who are in desperate need of professional help, but for different reasons, and I would say at least one of them being the American healthcare system, you know, are not able to get the help they need, and they heavily rely on each other for support. Grazina, like I said, has dementia, so a lot of the time she's mentally stuck in the past. Her childhood was spent in Eastern Europe during the Second World War. They were marked by constant fear, displacement, hunger, violence, and because of her dementia, she relives those moments over and over again. Hai tries to help her through these moments by pretending he's a soldier coming to save her, and in that way sort of talks her through the worst of it. Hai himself suffers from depression and an opioid addiction. He comes from a working class immigrant family with a single mom trying to make ends meet. He struggles to just get through each day, and caring for Grazina is you know, giving him a sense of purpose and belonging that he's been missing. He also works at a fast food diner where his co-workers seem to be dealing with a lot of the same issues, and mainly just a sense of feeling stuck and there being no way out. So yeah, this was my first time reading Ocean Vuong. I don't think it'll be my last. I don't think this is a perfect book. I definitely have some critiques, but overall I really enjoyed reading this. I loved his writing style. Ocean Vuong is also a poet, and I think that shows. At first I thought it was gonna be a little bit too ornate, because, you know, he uses a lot of metaphors, a lot of similes, but after a few pages I really got into it, and I really like it, but I do know it's gonna put some people off, you know, saying it's too lyrical, but you know what, I like that kind of stuff. It deals with topics that I find really interesting in literature, like finding your identity, about the far-reaching influence that poverty has on mental health, intergenerational trauma, memories, storytelling, unconventional relationships and found family, giving a voice to people who are often overlooked. I'm still debating whether I think the author might have taken on too much in this book. Also, it kind of teeters on the edge of sentimentality at some points. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked the quirky cast of characters. I loved the small town vibe. It's like Gilmore Girls, but just, you know, more working class and more bleak. Where like Stars Hollow represents the idyllic and the privileged, East Gladness, which is the town in which this book is set, represents like the more darker side of the American myth. So yeah, that was my ranking as I submitted them. Please take it with a grain of salt, because it could have been different. I'm very curious to see how other people have ranked this book and, you know, like their thought process behind it. I don't feel very invested in the results of this group, because I can see for every book why other people would like or dislike it, and I didn't love any of these books enough to really root for them to make it through the finals. So yeah, that's that. I did have a good time though. I do think the whole process of it is fun. I signed up for another round for the quarterfinals, for non-fiction this time, but to be honest with you, I'll wait to see what books I'll get assigned before I make an actual decision, purely for practical reasons, in regards to how easy I can get a hold of these books, and if I get assigned 6, 500 plus page books, then I might opt out as well. We'll see how that goes. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye.